Terima kasih kepada saya, Leonard Samosir, yang sudah memandu acara sesi panel pertama dengan sangat baik. And it was a very interesting session that we know that we have to work together towards the betterment for Indonesia for coming years. Bapak dan Ibu, sesuai dengan harapan UN di target tahun 2030 bahwa percepatan suhu sebesar 1,5 derajat dan sampah emisi karbon yang rendah serta perubahan iklim menjadi pekerjaan rumah kita semua. Belum lagi krisis air bersih, terutama di berbagai wilayah di Indonesia yang semakin menjadi komoditi yang cukup jarang dan dapat dinikmati oleh rakyat kecil. Dan menurut Water Report yang setiap tahun dikeluarkan oleh IGCN, itu sangat-sangat terjadi. Bagaimanakah sense of urgency dari berbagai stakeholder di negara kita dapat bersatu padu dan bekerja sama dalam menanggulanginya? Berikut ini kita akan mendengarkan panel kedua yang bertajuk Urgent Action to Combat Climate Change yang mengetengahkan pembicara dari UN Body, Civil Society Organization, dan juga pihak bisnis. Diskusi ini akan dipandu oleh CEO Medcom.id, Ibu Kania Sutisna Winata. Kepada Ibu Kania kami persilahkan.
Ya, baik. Terima kasih Pak David atas pengantar tersebut. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and also to our respectable panelists, Ibu Amanda Katili Niode, PhD, Manager of the Climate Reality Project Indonesia, Bapak Dharsono Hartono, CEO PT Rimba Makmur Utama, kemudian juga Dr. Hans Thulstrup, Senior Program Specialist for Water and Environmental Sciences of UNESCO. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second panel discussion today, which is entitled Urgent Action to Combat Climate Change. And this is an event entitled Building Stronger Partnership in the Decade of Action on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the Republic of Indonesia, the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, and the 20th anniversary of the United Nations Global Compact. And this was organized also by Indonesia Global Compact Network, or IGCN, in partnership with the United Nations in Indonesia. And before we begin this discussion, let me again introduce myself. I'm Kania Sutisna Winata. I'm from Medcom.id, which is a news and video portal, member of Media Group in Indonesia, which is also media partner of this event. And it is an honor for me to participate in this event and moderate the following panel discussion. In this panel, ladies and gentlemen, we will be discussing, as was mentioned earlier, the urgency for business, government, and also NGOs to take actions to combat climate change. So first of all, no, climate change has not stopped for COVID-19. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said, quote, the heating of our planet has not let up, unquote. Levels of GHG emission are still rising, and this is according to the latest report of United in Science 2020. The Earth is now 1.1 degrees Celsius warmer than it was at the start of the Industrial Revolution, and we are not on track to meet the objectives agreed in the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change, which is to limit global temperature rise well below 2 degrees Celsius or at 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. 2010 until 2019 has been the warmest decade on record, and if nothing is to be done or remain the same, the global temperature is expected to increase by 3 to 5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, condition which is in fact perhaps worsening. So evidence is all around us. We've seen drought, disasters, diseases, and even anxiety caused by this disruptive climate change that not only affects us, but perhaps mainly the future generation. So let's talk about it. This is a very important issue. What can we do collaboratively? That's I think the key word, as business, government agency, and also non-state actors to tackle this crisis. So let me start this session by asking our panelists thoughts, of course. As was mentioned earlier, I'd like to introduce again Ibu Amanda Katili Niode, PhD, Manager of the Climate Reality Project in Indonesia. Also Bapak Dharsono Hartono, CEO of PT Rimba Makmur Utama, and Dr. Hans Thulstrup, Senior Program Specialist for Water Environmental Sciences of UNESCO. Thank you again, Bapak Ibu, for joining us in this very important session. Later on, if we have the time, I will be also taking questions from the audience as well, perhaps. So if you'd like to submit your questions, you can use the Q&A section in this Zoom conference. So let me first go to Ibu Amanda Katili Niode. Ibu, take us through your experience so far. You are an environmental and climate change specialist with a long experience on tackling these issues. So in your view, are we facing a climate crisis right now in terms of awareness? Are we better equipped maybe now to tackle the problems? And is there more awareness right now compared to 5 to 10 years ago? Bu Amanda.
Thank you.
I'd like to establish that first.
Okay. Thank you, Ibu Kanya, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, participants from all over the world. This meeting is really very timely, and because we are now facing global crisis after crisis after crisis. It's not only the pandemic, but also the global climate crisis, the hunger crisis, biodiversity crisis, you name it. We have everything. And the efforts that we need to face those global crises have to come from state actors, countries, and non-state actors. And we are here, non-state actors, government, private sector, subnational governments, businesses, academia, and also interest groups. If you ask whether we are better equipped with the awareness of the climate crisis, we have to keep raising the awareness of the climate crisis, because the science, the new research, and all kinds of experiments keep coming up, and the situation is changing. Of course, compared to like 15 years ago, the awareness is increasing. But we have to keep reminding people, we have to keep reminding stakeholders that the situation is different. You mentioned about the United in Science, the recent report by a number of UN organizations. But again, like I said, there are numbers of reports coming out. A few days ago, a new provisional report from the World Health Organization, from the World Meteorological Organizations on the global climate status, shows how high impact events, including extreme heat, wildfires, and floods affected millions of people. The numbers come up to 50 million of people, compounding threats to human health and security and economic stability posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. We do have the elements to raise the awareness. We do have the knowledge how to do it, but we have to keep doing it with the multi-stakeholders.
Okay, so the next question would be, how do you engage these multi-stakeholders, such as yourself? You are manager of the Climate Reality Project Indonesia, which is a non-state actors, as you mentioned earlier. How do you see your role in it, and how do you engage other actors to combat climate change and make changes or make actions that are impactful?
Let me refer to the Climate Reality Project, the organization that I'm in. It's a nonprofit organization with 31,000 volunteer climate reality leaders mobilizing communities in 170 countries. We are a diverse group of passionate individuals consisting of activists, cultural leaders, organizers, scientists, storytellers committed to building a sustainable future together. We have a mission. Of course, we have to have a mission. In order to address issues, we have to have a mission. And our mission is to catalyze a global solution to the climate crisis by making urgent action a necessity across every sector of society. So we do it by empowering everyday people to become activists, equipped with the tools, training, and network to fight for solutions and drive change planet-wise. The most important thing is to know that the pandemic and also the climate crisis are global environmental disruptions. They are set apart from conventional ones in that the global crisis, a country that generates pollution, is not always the country that suffers from the pollution. And pollution can cross borders, inflicting damage on a wide area. So because of that, the solution requires the efforts of all countries of the world, and international arrangements to address the issue have been launched in recent years. And we have to adhere to that. We have to be familiar with international conventions like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We have to be familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, and we have to be familiar with international meetings coming up, either organized by the UN or other organizations.
Very well. I'd like to ask a couple of questions after this, but let's move on to Pa Dharsono Hartono, who's also with us this morning. Bapak Dharsono Hartono is CEO of PT Rimba Makmur Utama. This is an Indonesian-based company, and you've been selected, Pa Dharsono, as a sustainability pioneer at the 2020 Sustainable Development Impact Summit, which is in recognition of you as a business person from the private sector, pioneering new technologies and also innovations in tackling one of the world's major challenges, such as in your case, climate change. So a business person, climate change. So tell us more about the incredible work that you and your company is doing with the Katingan Mentaya project. This is a 200,000 plus hectares of peatland forest in central Kalimantan. Take us through how is forest conservation in line with profits for a company?
Thank you, Kanya. Thank you for having me today. I think our journey started 13 years ago when I came back from the US. I was lucky to graduate from school in the US, came back to Indonesia, always want to be entrepreneur. So I bumped into my business partner, Rezal Kusuma Atmaja, who actually challenged me and actually gave a proposal that is different. That was year 2007. He basically put a challenge that Dharsono, there's this new business where you can mitigate climate change by protecting the peatland forest, restoring it, protecting it. You're going to be able to provide sustainable livelihood for all the communities who live in that area, and finally make money. And I was sort of like horrified. I was like, how can that be possible? I mean, imagine 2007, sustainability is not in everybody's mind. But I think we are ahead of the curve at that time. And I think, for some of you who are not familiar with what we do, the product that we are selling is called carbon credit. So, 13 years fast forward, Katingan Mentaya project is the world largest land use based carbon credit project registered today. We're producing more than 7.5 million tons of carbon credit annually. I think that's equivalent to about 2 million cars out from, try to do that. So to answer your question, Kanye, that's a real impact of climate change, right? We are trying to restore and conserve our peatland forests, which are basically more and more people realize that we need nature for our survival. I think we have to be able to protect what we have left, our nature, our forests, our oceans, and also restore what has been broken. So I think that endeavor 13 years ago is some people think that it's just amazing that we know what we have to do. But I think from an entrepreneur perspective, it's one of the biggest decisions that I've made in my life. Because the fact is, it took us finally 10 years to start making our sales. People love what we were doing 13 years ago, but unfortunately, nobody's willing to pay for what we do. They always believe that, protecting and restoring forests is an NGO work. It's not a private sector. But I think things have changed. I mean, the past 3 years, you see that more and more, people understanding what we do, which is a nature-based solution project, we call it, because the fact that we need nature for our survival, there's a willingness to pay to project like us. But more importantly, not only that we are saving the forests, we also are working closely with communities and to be inclusive. Because the heart and soul of the Katingan Mentai project is not about protecting the nature, it's how we can work together with communities transparently as a project developers, as a private sectors, engaging with them, helping them to be more productive in a non-deforesting way, teaching them how to do farming, no burning, no chemical farming. All these things takes time. And I think we are glad that this 13 years, the project shows that there is a way for private sectors to be engaged. Because in the beginning, people will believe that, the company is too big, the land bank is too big. This is a new neo-colonialism system in the future, ongoing, right? The capitalist. But I think what we learned, the proof of concept the past 13 years is our company was so transparent in terms of what we do. Not only that, we have to be inclusive. It's actually a new paradigm of doing business where everybody wins. Climate change, we mitigate 7 million tons. We are inclusive. And finally, the companies start making money. So to tackle this climate change, sometimes we have to go outside the box. We should be stopping our consumption of fossil fuel, but there is a new opportunity. And the fact is, Indonesia is, basically, we are so lucky that we have so much forest, we have so much ocean. We should use this as an opportunity. Instead of like hearing all this haze and fire every year, we can turn this around. We can turn this around with all the work together of private sectors, civil society, and government. So I think multi-stakeholder collaboration is the key. And I think we are glad that we are part of this journey. Thank you.
That is amazing. That is amazing. But tell us what kind of partnership did you have to take, and also the policies in terms of government policies. How have they been supporting the company's efforts, and also maybe talk to us about the kind of partnership with maybe NGOs that you had to form in order to be able to engage the local communities to participate in this.
So I want to tell you my journey. I mean, basically we started in 2007. For the first 6 years, I was the only employee of PT Rimba Makmur Utama because I'm an entrepreneur. Really? I do everything. I do the government. I talk with stakeholders. I deal with everybody, in terms of getting the license. So finally, we got our license in 2013, which is 6 years after we started. Now we have closer to 800 staff. But what I think really, really important is we shown to the government that there is a new business. I think they were in the beginning, people don't believe that this will work. A lot of people are very skeptical. How can a private sector involve in this? But I think now the government see this as an opportunity. They are drafting a new regulation where basically we are going to incorporate this business, which is, putting a carbon price in the system that is going to be beneficial for the country like Indonesia because of the nature that we have. So I think I'm kind of excited, I'm kind of lucky and blessed the 13 years that I've been working together with all stakeholder. We work with international NGO like Clinton Foundation, Packard Foundation. We work with government like US Forest Services. We also work with the Indonesian government, the local government. But I was lucky that I was the only, even though I'm the only one who managed all this, we always believe that we got help from all of this. I'm always, Rezal and I always believe that we are not the smartest. We always look for people who are smarter than us. And I think it is, even in this panel, I have Amanda that has been helping us throughout this journey. I think we are grateful and lucky to be part of the success.
Thank you, Pa Dharsono. That's really amazing and very, very, very inspiring for all of us. Yeah. Let's go to Pa Hans to talk to us more about the 2020 UN World Water Development Report on Water and Climate Change, which has just been released, and take us through the highlights of this report. Is the world in a better place, Pa Hans?
I think we can say that it is, even though this has been a very, very challenging year in many ways. The World Water Development Report, I think first, I guess it's important to know, this is the UN system's flagship report on water, and it's published every year with a different theme. And this year, the theme is specifically on water and climate change. And that theme is given with the message that water is the medium through which nature and human societies experience most of the impacts of climate change. So when we feel climate change on our bodies, we often do so, most often, in one way or another, connected to water and water resources. So managing water sustainably is an essential part of the solution to climate change and how we address climate change. Now, why is that? I mean, that is partly because climate change challenges the sustainability of water resources, and we are already putting those resources under stress. So we can see this in many parts of the world. Climate change amplifies water-related extremes like floods, like droughts, and so puts us under extra pressure in the way that we work and deal with water. And we're here in Jakarta. Right now, it's raining outside. Yeah. We are here in a city which is experiencing, say, rapid land subsidence that's been exacerbated by over-extraction of groundwater. We're located right on the seaside. We're located in a city where part of the city is already below sea level. So we are, in a way, living a living example of this close association between the way we manage and use water and the way that we are vulnerable to climate change and to climate extremes. So that's a bit the context. Now, the report also talks about what the private sector can do to address these issues. And one point that's made in the report quite strongly is that the private sector is waking up, in a sense, waking up to the importance of water security and to recognizing that climate change impacts has also impacts on commercial success. And I think we just heard this from Dharsono just now in a
Sorry, Pak Hans. Pak Hans. I think we have some trouble with the connection. Is everybody?
Are you here?
Yeah, now we can hear you perfectly.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, now we can hear
Sorry
you perfectly.
about that.
But
so
I
was just.
Yeah, you can repeat that last bit maybe about the positive contributions.
Yeah, no,
from
really,
the
I was just referring.
Yeah.
I was just referring back to what Dharsono said just before. The importance of recognizing that the climate change, water security, this nexus, these connections have an impact on commercial success and viability. And I think that was a point we saw with deforestation, with biodiversity just before from Dharsono. So in fact, this you also see when you talk about water. Now, why is the private sector in the report waking up in this sense? It's for a good reason, and that is that climate change, in a sense, is a threat multiplier for risks in business, and we can see this in different ways. And we can see water scarcity exacerbated by climate change that connects and affects multiple sectors, like energy, like industrial outputs, food. Businesses may face difficulty in addressing and managing all these facets. Yeah. In fact, if we look at the majority of risk for industry and power generation, the risks are generated, say, outside the fence line. It's not within the control of the individual business. So you have to look at how to mitigate those risks beyond your own operations. And so I think a large and a really growing number of companies are working to achieve these positive outcomes. They do that by, for example, reducing the amount of water used for manufacturing. That in turn reduces the amount of energy required to treat water. They also do it through managing water scarcity risks, for example, by introducing circular water management, where water use changes from a linear process where you have clean water coming in and wastewater going out into a circular management system where water recirculates, loops back for continual use. So there are a number of ways that these actions can be taken. So there's also consequences, not only by taking action, but also by not taking action, by inaction. And you can look at those, you can monitorize those aspects by looking at comparing action, for example, by implementing flood protection of buildings with the cost of inaction, for example, looking at disruptions due to floods. So mitigating that vulnerability, you can look at what will it cost me to take action versus not to take action. And there are several good examples of global action at the global level. We now have over 50 corporate signatories to the Business Alliance for Water and Climate. They report, they manage, and they act on their water and climate impacts. They do set annual basemarks with CDP to look at how these companies track their progress towards a low carbon and water secure future. So there are international instruments in place that can help businesses keep track of how they are doing, how they are transitioning to a more water and climate secure future. And the data that comes out of what has been logged so far around the world has shown that it's difficult for companies to take action alone in silos within their own sectors. So I think events like today play a very important role, just like IGCN does, and just like the Global Compact does, in making these connections between sectors, between businesses, in bridging this sort of tendency to go it alone, which is much less effective. And maybe just to wrap up a bit, I think there is a notion we want to try to decarbonize the future. We want to reduce emissions, but in fact, reducing emissions, the actions that we can take to reduce emissions are actions that require access, reliable access to water. So the very act of reducing emissions, of acting on climate, depends on us having access to water. So that gives us a kind of a loop, an extra incentive to take care of those resources and really to think about water and climate. So in summary, and to close this longer remark, action by the private sector has really significance at the global level as well as at the local level. And I think if we're going to deliver on the 2030 agenda, on the SDGs we heard before from Amanda, we have to have the private sector in a leading role. And of course, there are benefits, provide benefits through the possibility to create jobs, improve public health, reduce poverty, promote gender equality, enhance livelihoods, and strengthen the bankability of these initiatives in the eyes of finances. So I think that's really where I would sort of round up this little brief tour of the report and these key points on water, climate, and the private sector.
Okay, thank you for that, Pak Hans. Before we take questions from our Q&A section, there was one particular question that was addressed to Pak Dharsono, but I'd like to probe more questions from Ibu Amanda first. Bu Amanda, with the current COVID pandemic, what are some of the opportunities? Perhaps I don't want to talk about the delays that was perhaps discussed in the first session of this event, but let us focus on the positive instead of the negative. What do you think, Ibu Amanda, the opportunities that are presented that perhaps can be gained, for all actors, committed to combat climate change with the COVID-19 pandemic, Ibu Amanda? Are there opportunities you think available right now? Is it maybe the time to take more actions despite the COVID-19 pandemic?
You know that the Chinese proverb, in every crisis, there is always opportunity. So we have to know the crisis first before we can explore the opportunities. But our challenge now is to carry the gravity of the pandemic with us while continuing our work to solve the climate crisis and create a truly just and healthy future for all. Now, what can we do? We have to break the chain of the pandemic. as stated by UNEP and its partners, there are exploitation of wildlife, and then of course also climate change, food supply chain, agricultural intensification. How can we address that? So how can we work to break the chain of the pandemic? With climate reality, what we are doing is we stress the importance to take climate action to prevent the next pandemic. We also can do many activities to make a difference in the fight against the climate crisis, including, like you mentioned in your first question to me, spreading the awareness, drive actions, and support solutions for the climate crisis.
But is it enough?
It is not enough, but we have to keep doing it through different angles. At Climate Reality, we call it the acts of leadership. So we do lots of media presentations, and then also meeting influencers, public outreach, and organize or participate in a good event like this. And the most important thing is create resources to spread the awareness again. And not only the awareness, but we have to know the solutions, and we have the solutions at hand.
We have the solution at hand. Very well. Pa Dharsono, tell us about what has been the experience for your company going through this COVID-19 pandemic. How has it impacted business? And going forward, do you think that recovery can go hand in hand with green measures?
Thank you for the question.
Especially maybe, you know, for other players in the private sectors.
So when the pandemic started about past February, I wonder, you know, how the survival of the company will be, right? Everybody will be focusing on survival instead of looking to buy carbon credit or carbon offset. But I think what we realize is actually, you know, we still have a lot of people looking for carbon credit. So COVID doesn't make us, you know, disappointed or frustrated in a company sense. But I think it's also giving us a lot of lessons as well as the robustness of the market. The fact is, people now, you know, even when a downturn like this, people realize what we do is providing value that is that we are giving. On the field itself, of course, with COVID, there's a lot of things that we have to do to change the way we do business. But I think since we work closely with communities, there is a self-awareness in the community as well. How, you know, social distancing is important. We need to wash your hand. You have to wear your mask. Yeah. And I think, you know, where we used to have a lot of event with like 30 or 40 farmers, we make it smaller. But I think the good news is, I think, you know, human can adapt. Sometimes we have to make hard choices. But I think we know. I think the key is, you know, for people in the field, you know, with the help like us, we can do this. And just to give you know, sort of like a challenge statement, changing behavior is not easy, Kanya. I mean, when I started this project 13 years ago, changing a behavior of a farmer by typically doing a slash and burn into a no burn, no chemical took us years. But I think once we get that, once that tipping point happened, it will happen. So I'm very optimistic with the newer generation, the millennial. We will solve these climate issues. Humans are smart enough if we work together to find it. There is a pathway for us to survive with this climate change issue.
So we can all contribute, yeah? The common people can all contribute individually but collaboratively to making an impact. I'm very sorry. This is like all the time that we have. I think we've gained so much from this discussion and from what the panelists have been conveying, the kind of message that's been conveyed throughout this discussion. But just to highlight the points that each and every panelist is trying to convey through this session, we have time maybe perhaps to give closing remarks to each of the panelists. Well, maybe we can start with Pa Hans first to give your closing remarks before we have to wrap up this session. Maybe you can touch a little bit on engaging the youth, yeah?
Yeah, I'd like to do that. Thank you very much for that. And I can maybe just to pick up directly from the comment just made by Dharsono now about this optimism that we can do something about this. I think one thing that's essential in that regard, of course, is young people. We have to focus on the young people. We have to make sure that the next generation of innovators, of business leaders, of scientists, and so forth, everybody is climate literate, understands the issues at hand, that they have the ability to communicate with others, and that they have the ability to mobilize those around them, other young people, their own communities, their families, their parents, etc., and that they have the skills to take that message as they enter the world of business or other sectors. I think this is really key. So we have an important job to do in engaging the young people. And of course, we had at UNESCO the pleasure of working with Amanda with the Climate Reality Project Indonesia, also with IGCN on activities that address this. And we tried with the onset of the pandemic, we tried to work on the development of communication skills for young people that looked at how do we translate this issue of water and climate change into the visual medium, into film. How can we bridge communication gaps by using all of the tools that are accessible to us? We had more than 60 short films produced under pandemic conditions at the beginning of this year. So these are the types of things that we feel very good about being involved with, and I think that we have to focus on how do we engage and empower young people so that they can take up the mantle and that they can, as we hear, but can solve this climate issue. We can start it. Young people have to carry that on and finish the job. So I wanted to end with that positive note. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Hans. Ibu Amanda, your closing remark, please.
Yeah, thank you. We all agree about multi-stakeholder collaboration, but allow me to categorize the stakeholders. Government is also always very important because of the policies issued, and that will create the biggest impact to address the climate crisis. That's the first category of the multi-stakeholders. And then the second category is, of course, organizations like private sector. Pak Dharsono already mentioned, Ibu Sinta. And so organizations include businesses as well as organizations like UNESCO. What Pak Hans mentioned about the collaboration between Climate Reality and UNESCO is the Youth Leadership Camp for Climate Crisis, where we created champions, millennials, on how they can address the climate crisis. And then how can we as individuals address the climate crisis? There are lots of tools, and the United Nations just a few months ago launched the Act Now campaign. There are several things that we could do as individuals to reduce our carbon footprint. For example, saving energy, reuse our clothes or sustainable fashion, or eating more plant-based meals. So as individuals, we have to do our part as well, although we are part of the multi-stakeholder collaborations.
Yeah, baik. Thank you, Ibu Amanda. Pak Dharsono, your closing remark.
Okay, I guess, 13 years with the Katingan Mentaya project, it's a proof of concept that there is a way we can mitigate climate change. Not only that, we can also solve the inequality in our society, where you can be inclusive. So this is a new model of doing business moving forward for companies. Every company should have a purpose. Profit cannot be the purpose anymore. Shareholder values are not profit. There has to be stakeholder value. But I think with our Katingan Mentaya project as an example, we can show to the world there is a solution. But of course, we need a lot of other stakeholders to be involved. And I'm always a glass half full kind of person. But I think when I started this 13 years ago compared to now, I'm more optimistic than ever that we will solve this thing together, especially for Indonesia, because we have so much, potential to be the contributor for the world. That's it from me. Thank you, Kania.
Thank you, Pak Dharsono. That is all very, very, very inspiring. And that is, unfortunately, all the time that we have for today's session. I am not going to conclude much, but it is clear through this discussion there is much needed to be done. But there is hope as long as we are willing to work together. we can make it happen. We can fight and combat climate change, and we can be in this together. So if not for us, then for our future generation, right? So ladies and gentlemen, as usual, let's conclude this session with a group picture. Yes, so maybe we can all pose for the group picture that is going to be taken by the panitia. Yeah. So let me just do the countdown for all of us to put our best smiles and do this group picture. So let's start. 3, 2, 1. Yes. Okay. Is it done? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you again for all the panelists and for all the audience for joining us in this very special section. It's been such an honor to moderate this event, and until next time.